Hey, what is going on, guys? Danny here, hope you've all been doing well. In this video, I wanted to talk about Battlefield 5's performance benchmarks and RTX performance. The newest installment to DICE's Battlefield series has just recently released, and like the previous titles before it, performance in regards to traditional rasterization rendering is fantastic. DICE has done a pretty good job at optimizing their games for console and PC. With Battlefield 1, I had played that game with various kinds of hardware, from quad cores to 8-core processors, a $200 graphics card, or a $750 graphics card. As long as you applied the appropriate settings, the game delivered fantastic performance. Battlefield 5 is no exception, where at 1080p a card like the RX 570 can deliver an average frame rate of 60 FPS using ultra settings, and at 1440p an RX 580 can deliver that level of performance with the same settings. So for the mid-range and entry-level cards, performance is looking pretty good. At 1440p, a 1080 Ti gets an average frame rate of around 100 FPS, which would let you experience some very buttery smooth gameplay. And you have other mid to high end cards like the 1080 to 2070 and NVIDIA 64 attain over 80 FPS, so performance all around has been pretty solid, and that's exactly what you want to see from a competitive first person shooter. However, one of the biggest highlights of this game is that it's the first to publicly allow players to take advantage of Nvidia's RTX through DXR. RTX was one of the main selling points for Nvidia's new 20 series graphics cards, and only they will be able to take advantage of it. Sort of. While the 2080 Ti, 2080, and 2070 all deliver great performance in terms of traditional rasterization rendering, with DXR enabled, performance just tanks so badly that it makes you wonder who would even bother with RTX. Guru 3D showed some benchmarks where they compared the performance of 3 RTX cards at 3 different resolutions with DXR disabled and with it enabled at various quality levels. At 1080p, the 2080 Ti with DXR disabled can give you almost 160 FPS, but as soon as you enable DXR at high, performance ends up falling just below 60 FPS, and it looks like DXR from medium through ultra all show the same performance deficit. It's only with DXR at low where the 2080 Ti sees a performance bump of around 20 FPS, reaching almost 80, so while it's not as bad as sub 60 FPS, at that point, would you not just disable DXR entirely and enjoy the experience at around 160 FPS? At 1440p and 4K, you might as well just forget about RTX entirely, as with higher resolutions, the performance deficit is so bad that you're not even going to be able to experience a playable experience. So the only reasonable resolution that RTX can be enabled at is 1080p, which is very disappointing to see because this is Nvidia's top-of-the-line $1,200 graphics card. I've never heard of anyone buying a graphics card that expensive just to play at 1080p sub 60 FPS. What makes this even more underwhelming is that performance is going to be even worse on the 2080 and 2070. If the 2080 Ti is just barely managing to hold 60 FPS at 1080p, what do you think will happen when the same settings are applied on less capable RTX graphics cards? And well, they did just that, and the results are quite disappointing, where the 2080 is dropping to an average FPS of around 50 frames per second, and the 2070 just under that at 40 frames per second. I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier. Battlefield 5 is a competitive shooter, where most users will be prioritizing a higher frame rate to allow for the smoothest gameplay over visual quality. Even me personally, with a 1080 Ti, I would actually use a mixture of settings so that I can attain an average frame rate close to my monitor's refresh rate of 144 Hz. There was an article on Tom's Hardware posted back in September, where they talked with the lead technical director from DICE, and he mentioned that they had to dial back on ray tracing and tone down some features as to help boost frame rate and make things look more credible. So the performance we're seeing now is with all the developer optimizations in place, where the end result is that only 1 out of the 3 RTX graphics cards can manage acceptable performance at 1080p. What a massive disappointment. Now, before I'm taken the wrong way, I'm not hating on RTX or ray tracing specifically. I actually think it's great that we finally do have cards that are capable of handling these methods of rendering in real time, and the effects, while pretty, are computationally heavy, so a performance deficit is to be expected. It's just that as of now, It's simply not worth it for the gamers. It's too expensive for the majority of gamers, and you're going to have a much better experience by sticking with DXR disabled and using traditional rasterization techniques. Not to mention, in order to fully utilize DXR, you need the best GPU in the market, and you have to dial back the resolution from 4K to 1080p, which doesn't really make sense at all, as resolution that's 4 times greater than 1080p will present a much better image, even without ray tracing and RTX. But this was just one of the first implementations of RTX. Who knows, we could see some patches and updates in the future to help alleviate the performance loss, and games in the future could show better performance. But as of now, it's not looking too good, and you're better off just sticking with the disabled as to not ruin your experience. I hope you guys found this video to be informative and helpful. Let me know your thoughts down below. Check out the video description for my other videos and ways to support the channel. And if you're interested in more content like this, then make sure you're subscribed. Thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.